I just want to address this and get it out of the way before this gets going, and I'll address something again before it really gets going. But all this nonsense about Chris Watts being a battered husband is a pile of baloney. The biggest pile of baloney that I've ever heard in my entire life. Shanann left him for 5 or 6 weeks, and I'll talk about this again in this podcast. In that time, he had more than enough time on his own to look for a divorce attorney, to separate, to look into moving away from Shanann and being away from her. I find it very hard to believe that a battered spouse and a wife who is so controlling would not only leave her husband for 5 weeks, but also before she leaves, she cleans the house, and she also cooks for Chris Watts. She cooks him meals, leaves them in the fridge so that when he comes home, he can reheat them. She left meals in the fridge that he could reheat when he came home. And how does he repay his wife? By cheating on her. So this idea that Shanann was some very controlling woman, it doesn't add up, because a controlling person who watches their husband like a hawk and who likes to tell their husband what to do would not leave their husband for 5 weeks. Just wouldn't happen. Doesn't make sense, and it doesn't add up. And I'm sorry, but Chris Watts doesn't get let off the hook because he was a coward, because that's exactly what he is. He doesn't get let off the hook because he was not able to speak up for himself. He had 5 or 6 weeks when Shanann was gone to look into getting a divorce. But instead, he decided that he was going to jump into the sack with NK because he's an idiot. That's exactly what Chris Watts is. All these people who think he's intelligent, I don't think he's intelligent. I think he's an idiot. I think he's a coward, and I think he's extremely evil. It's the early morning hours and the birds are chirping. Before I get this podcast really started, I want to say a few things first so that you understand exactly where I'm coming from and exactly why I'm not doing this. First of all, I am not speaking on behalf of the Ruzek family. I have no script. I used to use a script when I started my channel, and then I decided to scrap them. I actually find that it's just much better if I speak from the heart. It doesn't have to be perfectly polished. I have used scripts for some of my podcasts, or I've written notes for some of my podcasts, but I find that if I just speak from the heart, it actually tends to work out a lot better. So I'm not being scripted. I haven't written anything down in a script form. This is just me reacting to what I've been seeing on YouTube for the past 2 years, particularly. Also, I am not doing this to get any kind of praise or credit. I'm not doing this on behalf of the family for them to clap me or cheer me on. Yes, Frankie Ruzek comes to this channel. Frankie Jr. comes to this channel very often. And I don't always agree with Frankie. And that's the truth. And I don't always say the things that he wants to hear. So I'm not doing this to please anyone. I'm doing this because I think there needs to be something said about what has been going on social media, particularly on YouTube, with regard to Shanann and how her name has been dragged through the mud and degraded over and over and over again. And this is continuing to happen. Scott Peterson kills his wife and everyone says, oh, poor Lacey. She had a beautiful smile. She was warm. She was a wonderful person. Chris Watts kills his wife and everyone has sympathy at first. And then as time goes on and people start picking apart Shanann's videos, people start saying things like, oh, she was controlling. She was bossy. She was a bully. And he was just this weak, feeble man who didn't know how to speak up for himself. Let me tell you, I have never heard such a bunch of nonsense in my entire life. So what if Shanann was bossy? Give me a break. So you're telling me that Shanann being bossy is worse than what Chris Watts did with those oil tanks? Are you telling me that Shanann being bossy and Shanann filming her children, trying to, show her family how the kids are growing and developing? Because there's this myth that Shanann put everything on camera just to sell Thrive, which is absolute baloney. Shanann lived far from her family. She wanted her family, she wanted her parents and her brother to see how the kids were getting on, to see how they were developing, to see how they were growing. That was her way of spending time with her family via Zoom, taking pictures and videos so they could see and keep in touch with their family back in North Carolina, because they lived far away. They weren't seeing it, she wasn't seeing her family every single weekend or every single week. They saw each other sporadically over the years. And that's why Shanann wanted to record, because she wanted her parents, the grandparents of her children, to see Bella and Cece, not just because she wanted to sell Thrive. So that's a complete lie that Shanann was only filming because she wanted to portray a happy family. That's nonsense. But let me just say this, even if Shanann was bossy, are you going to say that her being bossy was worse than what Chris Watts did to his children with regard to those oil tanks? No one ever talks about that. No one ever sits down and actually says and discusses how disgusting it was for a father to do that to his children. Instead, they want to talk about Shanann being bossy. Give me a break. As someone who was grown up with, been raised by two quite narcissistic parents and a very controlling father, and as someone who has dated very controlling men who like to tell me what I can and can't do, what I can and can't wear, I'm telling you that Shanann doesn't even begin to be bossy. She doesn't even begin to define the term bossy in comparison to what I have experienced in my own life and what I've seen. I remember my parents had some friends, and the guy that she was married to, he would go and play sports on the weekend, and he would come back usually on a Sunday, and he would come back with his buddies, about 5 or 6 of them, and he would expect brunch or lunch to be served. She would make lunch or brunch for him, and she would put it in boxes to give to him. So him and his friends could go into the living room when they had a bar, and they would chat and they would eat and they would watch television. One day she decided that she wasn't going to make brunch or lunch for her husband. He had the boxes on the kitchen table ready for her to put the food in. Do you know what she did? When he came through the door with his friends, and he came into the kitchen with all of his friends, she threw every single box that he'd put on the table onto the floor and said, "Go and get your own lunch. I'm not your slave." Right in front of his friends. He was completely humiliated and embarrassed. And I was standing there in the kitchen with my mouth wide open because I was there at the time. And I've never seen Shanann do anything close to being like that. I've never seen Shanann do anything close to being that degrading and humiliating to her husband. And you want to talk about Shanann being bossy? And let me tell you something. This woman is still alive. And last time I checked, she was still married to this man, because I was a child when this happened. So they've been married for decades. They've been married for quite some time, and they're still together. So I think they've been married for quite a few years now. And they're still, and I think that last time I checked, it was quite a while ago. Last time I checked, they're still married. So this idea that Shanann deserved what she got, or this idea that Shanann, you can understand or have sympathy for Chris Watts because he had a bossy wife, is just baloney. It's ridiculous. The other thing I hear that people often talk about with regard to Shanann is that she was, her MLMs, she was spending money on MLMs. And she, one thing that Miss Mensa likes to talk about is the fact that she wasn't paying the mortgage, but she was going out to buy prime rib to impress her friends. So what? So she was bad with money. Big deal. If she was bad with money, then you know what you do? If Chris Watts thought she was bad with money, if he thought that she was bossy, you know what you do? You go and look at divorce lawyers. You separate. You get a divorce. You don't murder your wife. So what if she was bad at managing money? I don't care if Shanann was making $1 a month or 500 grand a month. Doesn't deserve what happened to her. She doesn't deserve what happened to her. It makes no difference. There's a lot of people and a lot of marriages. You know, even in my family, I've had aunts and uncles who have been in massive debt to the point where, you know, one of my aunts and uncles were planning to elope because of all the debt that they got into. I remember when I was younger, my dad had a very good job. We were comfortable, very comfortable. And my dad heard about ACN, which is an MLM company. And my dad joined, and he tried to get lots of other people to join. You know how multi-level marketing works. And, you know, we didn't really need the money. That's the truth. We didn't really need the money. And, you know, I think we did it for about a year. I mean, I was a kid at the time, but I was involved, you know, in some cases to try and recruit people. But I was a kid. But I was kind of like one of these mature children. And, you know, we did it for a while. It didn't work out. The only people that really make money from MLMs are the executives. You know, the big executives, the co-chairman, the executives. They're the only people that really make money from MLMs. But who cares? Who cares? It still doesn't mean that she deserved to be murdered. Who cares? If Chris Watts was unhappy in his marriage and his wife was so bossy and she was so terrible with money, he had 6 weeks, 5 or 6 weeks, where Shanann was with her family in North Carolina. Instead of jumping into the sack with NK, you know what he could have done? He could have gone and looked at a divorce attorney. That's what you do when you've had enough of your wife. So I don't care how much money she made or she didn't make. It makes no difference to me. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't examine what happened in the marriage and what could have made him do what he did leading up to the crime. I'm not saying that we can't look closer at things, but I don't care if Shanann was bossy or controlling. I don't care if she was bad at managing money. She didn't deserve what happened to her. Should we take a closer look at the children as well? Because remember, they were also taken out by their father. So should we examine the children and their behavior and see if we can understand why Chris did what he did to them? I mean, how ridiculous is this? The degrading and the, dragging Shanann's name through the mud. I've seen this happen time and time again on this platform. And I think it's an absolute disgrace. Another thing that I want to address, that I might address in more detail in another podcast, is this idea that Cindy and Ronnie Watts are being harassed and attacked. Absolute rubbish. Cindy and Ronnie Watts, and particularly Cindy Watts, faced a backlash in the beginning, in the initial stages of this crime, discovery of this crime, because of the things that she said about her daughter-in-law, because of her lack of empathy, because she blamed Shanann for what happened, because she still to this day is bitter about Shanann and refuses to hold her son accountable for the crimes that he committed. So the backlash against the Watts family is valid. No one's stalking them. No one's harassing them. No one's standing outside their door. In fact, they have a lot of support. Dave has been supportive. AD has been supportive. And many other people have been supportive of the Watts. So this idea that they don't have a single solitary bit of support is absolute nonsense. We have a lot of people in this community who defend them. So I'm not buying the poor Ronnie and Cindy Watts narrative that they're being harassed. Show me the proof, because I haven't seen anything that suggests to me that they're being harassed in the way that the Laundrie family have been harassed. And even though I'm not a fan of the Laundrie family, they are definitely victims of harassment. The other thing that I want to address is just some of the lies that people have been saying about Shanann being an abuser. You know, those people, they don't want to concentrate, or they don't want to talk about the videos where like the video that I watched today, where Shanann goes to her daughter's daycare center, says happy birthday to her daughter, sings happy birthday to her daughter, kisses her daughter on the cheek, and you see how loving a mother she is. You see what a loving mother and a loving person, and how bonded to her children she is. I never got the sense that Chris Watts was really bonded to his children. Maybe because I know what happened, and I believe that he's a soul killer. I don't believe anyone else was involved, but I do believe that Chris Watts was a plastic person all his life, pretending and playing a role and kind of molding himself almost like a chameleon. And his agenda all his life was to please and to appease people, to please his parents, to be good at sports, to be good at school. And I think that's what happened when he got married. In the beginning, he fulfilled that role. He fulfilled the role of the loving father, the loving husband, and he was eager to please Shanann. And I think when he met Nicole Kessinger, he was no longer interested in doing that anymore. I really don't think he was interested in anybody but Nicole Kessinger. And I think with the life insurance policies that there was on Shanann and the girls, that was a huge motive for him to get rid of his entire family. I don't think he wanted to be bothered with the emotional fallout of a divorce, the financial expenses of a divorce. I don't think he wanted to. I think he wanted to start over, and that meant getting rid of his kids. That's my personal opinion.